Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. You actually got me in a little bit of some light reading here, you know, Christmas classic. It's the holiday season. Let's be a little bit festive. You know, what's not to love about the Christmas time and all that? You know, you got snow, which will actually go sledding, hot chocolate, you know, reading a nice cozy book, ice, slush, seasonal depression.
Why are we still here?
But anyways, you know, let's go take a look and see what the weather's like outside. It's a Christmas miracle.
Previously, I've talked about how the fall aesthetic is my favorite due to the palette of colors on display and the reflective mood it puts me in. However, there is also something incredibly captivating about the imagery and tone commonly attached to wintertime. Perhaps an air of mystery filling your lungs as you navigate through cold gusts hiding secrets behind its relentless snow, or a sense of serenity as you take in the surrounding sea of white topped with a light snowfall. As somebody who has lived in the northern United States for most of my life, snow, ice, and its various side effects can be extremely nasty, but that brief period when the snow first falls or coats the scenery in a clean, cold blanket is pretty magical. When applied to the medium of video games, snow levels are typically true to real life. Maybe a bit irritating when you consider what comes with the territory, but visually they are beautiful and stunning. And if we're discussing visually stunning areas in video games, then we have to examine the Xenoblade Chronicles series' catalog. Across the 4 Xenoblade titles, there's a plethora of diverse locations, but also a handful of snow levels that each hold unique qualities that make them stand out from one another. So, to coincide with wintertime, we're going to be taking a look at each of these areas, highlighting various characteristics like the construction, atmosphere, music, and narrative presence. Although I won't be diving too much into that last criterion, in order to fulfill it, I will be briefly talking about story beats that occur within these areas. So, if you would like to avoid spoilers, now's your chance to click off and come back when you've completed these games. If you have, or just don't care about spoilers, then welcome. Let's kick this off by examining where it all started. First discovered about halfway through the game, the snowy peaks of Valak Mountain are located on the Bionis' right arm, and explored as the party makes their way to Galahad Fortress on their quest to save Fiora. Tucked between Magna Forest and Sword Valley, the series of peaks composing Valak Mountain are littered with treacherous caves and gravity-defying ice ramps, all topped off by a collection of large crystals. In the daytime, Valak Mountain is rather clear-cut as far as ice areas go, but when the sun sets is when the mountain shines both figuratively and literally. A golden hue smothers the mountainside thanks to those very crystals from earlier that emit yellow beams into the heavens, complementing the deep purple night sky. Although Xenoblade Chronicles had thoroughly impressed me with its art direction and beautiful vistas, arriving on Valak Mountain and seeing the transition to nighttime was the moment where I had to pick my jaw off the floor during my first playthrough. Perhaps I'm biased since yellow is my favorite color, but from my personal observations, I'm not the only one who was left stunned by what Valak Mountain had to offer visually. The blue glow of Ase Tower in the distance and the arc of clouds encapsulating the slope also add to its status as contained beauty. Interestingly enough, the game provides a reason for the consistent snowfall in a heart-to-heart called First Sight of Snow, found at the end of a path through Lalu's church where Reyn and Fiora discuss how water from Air Sea evaporates, freezes in the air, and then precipitates onto the right arm. World-building details like this are always appreciated and help the world to feel more realized as well as give weight to what the player is experiencing. Yet the player is really able to absorb their surroundings due to the location's arrangement. Valak Mountain's construction is rather unique as opposed to a number of the areas that precede it, since it's a primarily vertical location built to emphasize its enveloping sky and the ability to take in the sheer scale of the region itself. That's not to say that Xenoblade Chronicles hasn't mixed in predominantly vertical areas before Valak Mountain, as the Aether Mine and Frontier Village are straight shoots down and up respectively. Yet the Aether Mine and Frontier Village are rather straightforward in their build, feeling more like transitional points to move players to the next story beat or larger area of focus. The Aether Mine in particular even loses a majority of its explorable territory following the events with Zord at its base level. Additionally, both environments are also primarily held within the confines of walls. This focus on verticality in snow levels is actually a rather consistent variable across the series, and something we'll address as we continue. Yet, due to its vertical construction, most of the region's greatest draws put its sheer size and scale on display, which include Befalgar Pedestal, Free Sage Summit, and this Finn mountain path that isn't even on the map. It's quite strange to me that this path isn't charted, yet this one leading to Befalgar Pedestal is. However, the path through Lelouch Church follows the same principle, and I don't mind the existence of hidden paths, so to speak, as they prey on the player's curiosity. Nevertheless, Valak Mountain also takes advantage of incredibly fun forms of traversal with these geysers the player can use to reach higher ground, similar to the one found in Bionis Interior earlier, and, of course, the beloved ice ramps that launch the characters with enough speed to give the DeLorean a run for its money. These physics are fantastic. One might even say flawless, but I do like how the game makes use of them in order to access parts of the mountain range, like the secret area of Free Sage Summit. I know that plenty of criticism has been directed at Valak Mountain for being boring and too spacious for its own good. However, I feel that the issue isn't mainly the lack of interesting content. While I certainly feel that more things could be added to incentivize moving through these areas, I believe it speaks to a larger issue in Xenoblade Chronicles. In each region, landmarks for quick travel are rather spread out and can be inconvenient when it comes to journeying to notable points on the map. Take this area of Satoral Marsh for example, as there's no quick travel point to let the player conveniently access the entire tunnel comprising the Sota ruins or the Altar of Fate up north. The same logic applies to Valak Mountain, with there only being 5 landmarks on the top floor, despite how large of an area it is, making it tedious to reach these inner areas like Kana Peak or even the Agul Mountain Range ice ramp. So, while I do concede that some other objectives scattered across the mountain could improve it, I think Valak Mountain also suffers from the limitations of an outside mechanic rather than solely something inherent to its design. Regarding the wildlife, most of the creatures found here are variations on those found in other regions, but there are a few that are exclusive to the cold climate of Valak Mountain, which include Oris, Ares, and Chilkin. Later entries in the series typically create more unique creatures for each region, and I feel a wider pool of cold-adapted creatures would have helped Valak Mountain feel more alive. It is pretty awesome though how the Ares, Oris, and Slobos have all adapted to the Valak Mountain ecosystem, with yellow glows that aren't seen on their variants in any other region. However, Valak Mountain compensates for that lack of variation in its elite class, since it's home to a whopping 3 of the 5 total super bosses in this game: Blizzard Belgazis, Final Marcus, and Avalanche Abbasi, with the latter 2 both residing at Free Sage Summit. To me, their presence makes Valak Mountain feel all the more like that mysterious, uncontrollable location it's portrayed as, something accentuated even further by the music. The music resounding throughout Valak Mountain is particularly interesting as, unlike most day and nighttime themes, these songs couldn't be more different. The daytime version has a hypnotic-like quality to it, with the rhythmic strings leading the way for an oboe to take charge, making it resemble a lullaby of sorts in the first part. Despite having energy to it, it's quite reserved compared to the likes of Bionis Leg or Colony 9. The nighttime variant might be the most calming song in the game, with the sound of sparse piano notes and cymbals on a drum echoing down the mountainside. It's comforting and astoundingly atmospheric, matching perfectly with the yellow aura coating the environment, especially when considering the symbolic meaning of yellow as quiet, serene, and joyful. I feel that this track flawlessly captures what Valak Mountain is aiming for. Not a whimsical frozen wonderland, but a quiet, beautiful snow-filled corner of the world. One that might not fill you with oodles of joy, but you wouldn't mind laying down for a spell and just taking in the view. The nighttime theme is one of my favorite atmospheric tracks to listen to ever, and I honestly think the daytime theme is overhated. The hypnotic essence really captures that feeling of a seemingly endless task of scaling mountains up and down, and it's slightly unnerving. The stark contrast in their compositions fits exquisitely with what the environment is going for. A surprise factor. Just like you didn't expect the mountainside to turn aglow, neither did you expect the music to be drastically different and mellow. That brings us then to the narrative and lore presence of Valak Mountain, which is surprisingly notable despite the feelings of emptiness it emits on the surface. A lot of Valak Mountain's intrigue actually lies in the secrets concealed behind the strong atmosphere. This snowy region is home to the ruins of both the High Entia and the Giants found in Lelouch's Church and the final Giants ruins respectively. Even Ase Tower originated from the High Entian people as a way to seal away the Monado and Zanza. It also marks the resting place of Shulk's parents as well as the expedition team as seen in a flashback earlier in the game. The landmark at Ase Tower is actually known as Herit Chapel and marks the second religiously affiliated landmark on Valak Mountain. For Lelouch's Church, it's particularly interesting since it houses the original statue of the High Entian war god, copies of which can be found elsewhere and perhaps allude to a purpose much like temples in Greek belief that were dedicated to specific gods. It could also point to a connection between it and the Bionite Order, a zealous group acting in Alchemoth that worshipped the Bionis and valued the pure-blooded High Entian. With regards to key narrative events, Valak Mountain further develops the two plot points of Fiora's revival and the power of the Monado before showing how related they are in the grand scheme of things in the final hours. For starters, Alvis leads the party to Ase Tower to trigger Shulk's memories, and to engage in a deep conversation on the Monado's connection to the world and its ability to disrupt the flow of ether, granting it future sight. This cutscene is actually one of the best sources for understanding the mechanics behind the Monado. Well, aside from the fact that a megalomaniac of a god used it as his vacation home. Additionally, Valak Mountain hosts the reveal of Mumkar as Metalface, and the formal introduction of Egil, the leader of Mechonis.
Leader of Mechonis!
Yeah, that one. Although the unmasking of Metalface is not exactly unexpected following previous teases, it is a reveal I believe is well executed and beneficial to the narrative, even if he dies very shortly after. Plus, it's a neat design. I don't want to harp on the narrative components too much since most are not inherently tied to the actual construction of the areas themselves in any of the titles. But some instances like Ase Tower's position in an abandoned land or just their placement in the story usually inform the player of consistent variables like their late game positioning. Overall, despite some small flaws, Valak Mountain is an extremely noteworthy area that is built on its vertical construction, varied methods of traversal, and breathtaking sights, all culminating into my favorite area in the series. However, that doesn't mean that there isn't anything else great in this winter lineup. I know that a lot of people consider Savalum to be a snow area and would expect it to be the next spot on this. Yet, that is not the case. The truth is, Savalum isn't a snow world. Its floor is covered in sand, locations adopt the name of cinder dunes or sand seas, and the particles filling the air are spores, not snow. There is an aurora that can appear here at this time of year, at this time of day. And this part of Mira, localized entirely in Savalum, but that's not really enough to go with. So, since Xenoblade Chronicles X lacks a traditional snowy environment, the next stop on this Polar Express finds us in the world of Allrest at the Titan of Genbu. With its protective shell, Genbu typically hides under the Cloud Sea to avoid influence of other foreign parties. The trade-off for this sub-aquatic, or sub-cumulo lifestyle is the persistent snowfall, a weather condition that is unique to Tantal alongside ether fog, which increases the movement of ether particles in the air and imbues it with a green coloration. In its base state, Tantal Day plays it pretty safe. However, at nighttime, the Titan fills with a thick cloud of snow that obscures the view with its blue hue, in conjunction with the ether particles floating out from the ground. It's not as drastic a transformation as Valak Mountain, but its reserved nature is fitting for a Titan that's always stayed out of the spotlight, harboring a dark secret. More on that later. Like a lot of elements in its world, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 takes time in the main narrative to explain processes in its world, clarifying that Genbu was not always like this. Before the truth is revealed later, Zeke believes the Titan just has poor circulation, leaving his home with the harsh climate it has. From the sheer size of it alone, the Kingdom of Tantal is massive and is divided into 5 main areas in the skip travel menu. The city of Feoswar, Theoskaldia Palace, the upper level, the lower level, and the head. As opposed to Valak Mountain, where the only inhabitants were some Chilkin and traveling Napon, Genbu is home to an entire kingdom, which means that the area possesses a higher level of presence due to the updated architecture, greater number of sentient life, and the livelier music. The architecture forming the city of Feoswar and its palace are 2 of the biggest draws to this area, as they collectively form the centerpiece of Tantal and stand out to the player as a means of orienting themselves. The faint glow of lights from the buildings, as well as those from the ether lines, also help the city stand out through the dense snowfall. Outside the city lines, the scale expands, putting into perspective that Genbu resembles a massive snow globe, and the primary adornments are the towering, ruinous pillars the player will work down steadily to reach the globe's base. These ruins offer so much in terms of exploration, with paths leading up, down, all around, don't know quite what to do to get through. Despite Tantal's abundance of ruins adorned with mysterious patterns, I feel that the presence of the Tantalese and a general understanding of the Titan's history ever since the migration of the Tornans following their Titan's sinking marks a big difference between Valak Mountain and Tantal. The former falls more on the side of untouched beauty and almost mythology, as the High Entian architecture is advanced in nature, but we know that it belongs to a time period with very little recorded history. While the curiosity that Tantal sparks is a bit different. The history feels more tangible in a way, and like those missing gaps could be filled in with further research. The presence of large-scale architecture mixed with the snowfield aesthetic has always reminded me of the areas on Halo rings leading up to the control rooms, and it leads to some fantastic, large-scale shots of the landscape that feel like something taken out of a painting. Also similar to Valak Mountain is the presence of an ice slide, but it just doesn't hit the same. The physics are much more reserved in this game, and patches of ice like this don't allow for as many shenanigans. Even patches of ice like those found at the central ether boulder would have previously led to an impressive display of ice skating in Xenoblade Chronicles. Another brief comparison is that the collectibles gathered in Tantal can also be found on Valak Mountain, and are exclusive to those regions, including emerald snow, ice cabbages, broom icicles, amethyst vanilla, and so on. Unlike with Elysium, there isn't any greater significance to any of these collectibles. They simply contain snow-related elements, or take inspiration from flora found in colder climates or mountainous regions in our world. While Valak Mountain did not introduce too many new monsters to be discovered, Tantal takes the polar opposite approach with an incredibly diverse pool of creatures added to flesh out its ecosystem. It also just has the most minor normal enemies to encounter, being nearly 70. The deer-like Ares and Oris are once again back, alongside a slew of other occupants like the snowbird Pengs and the giant beetles known as Plambus, which are only exclusive to Tantal when considering the base game. Unfortunately, the birth of a universe included Chilkin Erasure in the old world, but it is replaced by an even more advanced species of Turkin that founded their own nation of Turkinlandia. Turkin and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 are just gigabrains, like on a whole other level of intellect compared to their integration in other entries. Communicating fluently, building communes, and even disappearing to hide during the ether fog weather, since it draws out stronger monsters in the area. Whether that was intentional or not, it's a fantastic detail. Super bosses in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 are more numerous, jumping from 5 to 8, but were also distributed out far more, with only one appearing in Tantal, the level 110 Cthulhu monster, Cloudsea Ken. Moving on to the most populous sentient life on Genbu, due to the isolated nature of the Titan, the Tantalese people have been sheltered from the world outside of their bubble, which leads to them having limited knowledge on the world afloat the Cloud Sea. Additionally, some physical traits seem to be consistent across a majority of them, including markings on their face, pointed ears, and reddish or orange hair. Those that don't have a lighter brown hair color, such as the king, Eulogeminos, whose hair color is completely different from Zeke's, which brings the nature of Zeke's mother into question and whether she was someone who lived outside Tantal, since Eulogeminos was known to have traveled in his youth. The Tantalese believe they are descended from the Tornan hero of legend Adam. However, following the migration to Tantal and the disappearance of Adam, mass arguments and conflicts broke out over the correct way to move forward, which is where the Tantal family jumped in, claiming they shared Adam's bloodline and they were the rightful successors to the throne. Although it has not been confirmed, there is reason to believe that Prince Zetter, Adam's uncle, was the one to make this claim and rise to power. The Tantalese might not have known none the wiser, but the Praetorium on Indal were privy to the truth, something they used to blackmail Eugeminos and kickstart the main story events that occur in Tantal. I'll save the rest of that discussion for its respective section, so let's talk about the music first. If you count Feoswar and Tantal's main area, it means that this titan is graced with 4 unique songs, 2 daytime and 2 nighttime variants, which couldn't be more different. Let's begin with Tantal's field theme. Valak Mountain's secluded, reflective atmosphere was further solidified by its quiet music. So, how does Tantal's music compare? Yeah, it gets the blood pumping. Tantal Day is a grand, spirited tune that gives the snowfield practically larger significance than it really has. It even adopts the vocal aspect of Feoswar by adding a choir to its ensemble. Yet this stark contrast between Valak Mountain and Tantal was actually the goal behind the song. Alongside the Xenoblade Chronicles 2 soundtrack, there is a booklet containing liner notes on each of the songs found in the game, giving insight into the various composers' creative processes. Tantal's day and night themes were done by the group Ace Plus, which originally was composed of Tomori Kudo and Hiroryu Yamanaka, also known as Chico, before the third member joined, Kenji Hiramatsu, who the Plus represents. Here is what the member Tomori Kudo had to say about Tantal's day theme. I think the snowfield theme for the first Xenoblade was pretty quiet and calm, so I wanted to try making something that was more high-tempo, but still had a good feel to it. People tend to imagine snowfields as having an echo, yet also having a lot of sounds that feel close. That gets reflected in the music by having drum kicks that mimic tight footsteps without much echo to them. So I tried to keep that image in mind as well when making the song. The Bratislava Symphony Choir did the chorus for us. While he mentions the use of choice instruments to craft the sound of echoes, I think the choir accomplishes that quite well, almost as if you can hear the voices of the mountains. Tantal's night theme follows the same melody, but with less bombastic elements and almost a melancholic feeling to it. Here's what Kudo had to say on the song. I always think acoustic guitars are easy to get a warm feeling from, so I wanted to try getting a cold feeling from one instead. I thought some guitar harmonics would be nice for creating an otherworldly atmosphere. I love recording multiple guitars. The harmony is a lot different from the day theme too. I love harmonizing things, so making the night arrangement was a blast. I hope people can hear the intermingling tones of longing and profound desire for traces of warmth at play with one another. I love what Kudo writes at the very end about this tune capturing that desire for refuge and warmth in the harshest of elements, and I think it explains the feelings of melancholia the song emits for me. Yet, that's only half of Tantal's music. Within Feoswar are 2 main songs, the day theme, Ever Come to an End, and the night variant, Shadow of the Lowlands. 2 lyrical tracks composed by Yasunori Mitsuda and performed by vocal ensemble ANÚNA, who have worked on a number of game-related projects, including Xenogears Revival, the first and the last, a project to celebrate the game's 20th anniversary. Sarah Veda, I'm so sorry for butchering your last name in a previous video, has been a member of the group since 2013, and would go on to act as the soloist for Xenoblade Chronicles 3's 2 lyrical tracks, A Step Away and Where We Belong. It's not only awesome to see how massive of a fan she is of the game, but how Mitsuda's collaboration with ANÚNA in Xenoblade 2 has blossomed into something much greater. But hold that thought, because Mitsuda had apparently been a longtime fan of the group's work, which he mentioned in his notes on Ever Come to an End. When I first thought about making a town theme for the Kingdom of Tantal, a snow-draped city enshrouded in mystery, I wanted to try making it with only vocals. I had a miraculous chance to meet the Irish chorus group ANÚNA, who I wanted to try making music with for over 20 years. And after that, I couldn't imagine making this song with anyone but them. Their sound painted my insides, and a melody just came bubbling out of me. So I ended up writing the whole song in one sitting. The lyrics to the song are grim, yet hopeful, coming from the perspective of a people who have suffered in darkness but hold on to their faith and hope that they will be delivered from these cold and darkened days. For Xenoblade Chronicles 2, these lyrics are spot on, with Alrest being a bleak world filled with people looking for some semblance of hope to cling to, as their god abandoned them and their homes slowly deteriorate. Apparently, the original soundtrack Trinity box includes Japanese lyrics for this song that are much more literal, speaking to the people of Tantal and their status as people of light descended from the blood of Adam Origo. Finally, we have Shadows of the Lowlands, which uses the same melody and lyrics as its daytime variant. However, instead of a lead female vocalist, this version incorporates a male one.
Shadows of the lowland leading to the cold and darkened days.
According to Mitsuda, this was to represent the stillness of night, alongside the use of an Irish harp to capture the heavy, endlessly falling snow. This version does give me the impression of someone singing at nightfall with a light snow in the center square of a quiet, sleepy village, so I'd certainly say mission accomplished. Okay, whew, that was a lot. But I want to thank Corey for all the help with the translations used in this segment, as it's incredibly interesting seeing how these composers' ideas were translated into sound. You might also wonder why I didn't include liner notes for Valak Mountain, and it's because I couldn't find any. Nothing I found in my research mentioned the existence of liner notes with the Xenoblade Chronicles soundtrack, nor with the Trinity box, so if there are notes for Valak Mountain, please let me know. I'd really like to check them out. To close off Tantal, let's talk about its place in the narrative. As mentioned earlier, the Tantalese people are those that usurped the throne through deception, leading future generations to believe they were descended from Adam Origo. This lie became the royal family's greatest strength and weakness, as the Praetorium and Amalthus threatened to expose this truth unless they paid them inconsistent tributes of core chips, which the Praetorium used to gain power on the main stage and control the flow of goods in Alrest. Yet, to refine and craft these core chips, ether energy was siphoned from Genbu's flow, leaving the Titan deprived of energy and the people left with harsh climate, poor harvests, and the Genbu we see today. Eventually, the Praetorium upped their demands to the tool they used to control Genbu, the Omega Fetter. So, when the Aegis showed up, Eula saw a golden opportunity to free his people from the shackles of Indul, by destroying her and another tool they would use as a weapon against the isolationist nation. This covers the reason why the party is imprisoned, and the state of Tantal as a frozen wasteland. While the lore here feels less like a story pulled from mythology like it does on Valak Mountain, it's a page taken from passed down history. Pyra is not destroyed, but she is captured by Torna following their assault at Genbu's head, which heavily demoralized Rex and sent him on the path towards Xenoblade Chronicles 2's endgame, thus bringing an end to Tantal. Due to the amount of provided information, as well as its sheer scale and ambition, there was obviously a lot to say about Tantal, and I really appreciate how it was able to stand apart from its snowy predecessor. Although one might believe that the only place to go from here was even bigger and better, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 decided on a different approach. As a part of the Isha region, Captocorn Peak is a rather small slice of the Ionios pie. Why did I write that? Yet it also serves as the connective tissue between Cadencia and the greater part of Isha, bringing the party back to where this whole wild ride began. Instead of the expansive locations filled with vertical-based paths, wide snowfields, and ancient architecture, Captocorn Peak opts for a more simplistic approach, with twisting walkways floating above the world, without much in terms of theatrics. Plenty of these paths are formed from the remains of great fallen trees, which is probably my favorite aspect of the peak. It makes me wonder what this location might have originally looked like back during Aionios' formation. Was it an enormous forest filled with trees that blocked the sky? That would be perfectly logical if that were the case, since the head of Xenoblade Chronicles 2's Gormott makes up most of Captocorn Peak's surface, and that titan was covered in gnarled root paths and massive trees, including the way tree found on the upper level. This is also the snow area in the series with the clearest view of the sky so far, without lights, heavy snowfall, or swirling clouds to interfere. It's honestly simple, but a refreshing change of pace to see the sunset and starry night so clearly amidst the snow. Similarly to Tantal, light ether particles also seem to be floating in the air, but to a much lesser degree, which would tie into the diminished amount of ether available in Aionios compared to previous titles. Unfortunately, Captocorn Peak lacks a special weather condition like its predecessors. Furthermore, this area is the smallest and most linear of the series' snow environments by a wide margin, with most branching paths quickly reconnecting to the main path, or serving very little purpose for exploration aside from pickups and filling out the map. As a result, there aren't any hidden paths like Valak Mountain or crazy secrets to be found. Functionally, Captocorn Peak houses the Cloud Keep, Nia's resting place, and Colony Omega, the setting for the core events of Mio's side story. Given the smaller territory that Captocorn Peak has to work with, it might not be surprising that it has the smallest pool of wildlife found in a snow environment, with only 16 normal minor enemies encountered, and the two staples of Ares and Oris aren't even exclusive anymore because they can be found in the cold climate of the Cavity, the giant gap that was formed when the Agnes Castle Annihilator shot where the city was previously. Honestly, there is not much to say about this area except that it's marked by its rugged terrain and immensely powerful creatures, including one of the game's 5 super bosses, as well as the strongest one at level 120, Seraphic Ceratinia. Not even Captocorn Peak has a super boss this time around. Yet, I do want to call to attention a rather cute detail that may or may not have been intentional. If you inspect the list of collectible items and align it with Captocorn Peak's foundation and Gormott, there's a couple things to notice. Several of the items found in Captocorn Peak include fossils, specifically Belufo and giant hornets, and that becomes quite fascinating when you recall the creatures found on Gormott, which include Gorian Belufos and yellow skeeters, mosquito or wasp-like enemies that become aggressive when their nests are approached. Although I'm not sure what they're doing on the surface if they are fossils from the old world, that is a super sick detail that I truly do wonder if it was planned out. But regardless, let's talk about a feature that Captocorn Peak does have in line with its predecessors, which is a killer soundtrack. With the addition of Cloud Keep, there are 3 songs to work with, but let's start with the day theme for the peak. The song utilizes a persistent bass drum and strings before paving the way for an oboe and choir to bring everything together. It's absolutely fantastic and triumphant in nature as a grand change of pace from the likes of Valak Mountain and Tantal. Fortunately, the Xenoblade Chronicles free soundtrack comes with liner notes of its own that provide more insight into the composer's thought process just like before. This time we have Minami Kyoto, who has been with Xenoblade since the first entry, and wrote that, although she was worried about recording the brass, the final result was her favorite song that she worked on for Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Like most night variants, Captocorn Peak turns the energy down and adds a level of winter magic for the use of chimes. On this theme, Kyoto noted the following: "When I think of snow, I am inclined to choose this kind of tone. The Captocorn Peak looks somehow brighter with the reflection of the snow. When I was a child, I loved bright nights with snow on the ground. The world was somehow quieter than usual, with the snow absorbing the sound, and the world was pale and slightly bright. I chose the sounds and wrote this song hoping that I could express such a feeling through music. Finally, we have the Cloud Keep theme, a tune with an angelic quality to it thanks to the choir, strings, and piano, but there's also an emotional, almost sad air to it in the melody's second half, meant to symbolize the end of a long, arduous journey. To prepare for this video, I listened to the song a lot, and I absolutely adore it, and it's only bolstered by the brief motif of drifting soul used in the first half. When I first heard this, I had the dumbest smile on my face as I realized, yep, Nia really is here. The liner note this time around comes from Ace Plus's Chico, who writes, "I have learned several times in my high school in Kyoto that Sho is the voice from the sky, and Gagaku is the oldest orchestra. I created this piece with the feeling that the moment I entered the fortress in the sky, I would start with the sound of Sho and combine it with the modern instruments to enter the celestial world of Free. At 2 minutes and 19 seconds, I added the melody of Drifting Soul casually with a glockenspiel, but I wonder if you noticed it." Well, I can certainly say we noticed it, and it was a small addition that went a long way. A big thank you to Crumpi for the translations used for these excerpts. Since Captocorn Peak is so small and linear in its design, there aren't really any interesting lore aspects to discuss aside from the previously mentioned connection to Gormott. Yet it's actually quite rich in narrative content, bringing us back once again to the threshold of the Cloud Keep. Oh, by the way, there's Dromark. Following the events at Agnes Castle, the party sets off to the Flying Palace in order to wake Nia, the true queen of Agnes, and to discover a way to free the world of Mobius's grip. This road also leads to another encounter with Consuls J and D, giving more insight into the two characters as someone who went too far in his journey to prove himself, and the other being a complete psychopath. I won't lie, the fake out with Nia dying actually got a reaction out of me the first time I saw it, so between that, hearing the Cloud Keep theme, and the following lore dump about the true nature of Aionios, I probably hit the whole lineup of reactions. It's also a homecoming of sorts for Mio, who was stationed in Captocorn Peak at Colony Omega years before the events of the main game. It was at this time that Miyabi sacrificed herself to save Mio, an event that altered Mio's view on life and allowed her to open up to Noah more through the recognition of their selfless view on Offseeing. So, despite being extremely small in the grand scheme of things, a lot does actually happen in this region. Regardless, with everything in consideration, Captocorn Peak is the snow area with the least to say about it. The music is fantastic, the aesthetic of a floating snowfield littered with route walkways is pretty cute, and Cloud Keep does give it a noteworthy narrative presence. Yet, I feel it lacks that wow factor that Valak Mountain and Tantal had, which is likely because it uses Gormott as its foundation and evolved from there. There is actually shockingly little DNA of Valak Mountain and Tantal here, aside from the shared creatures and presence of snow. However, our winter trip doesn't end here, and most of these alluring elements found their way into the last trick Xenoblade Chronicles 3 hid up its sleeve: Future Redeemed. Home to frozen balls and the sickest weather condition in the series, the Black Mountains act as the final stretch for the expansion story's conclusion and the final snow environment in the Klaus saga. The Black Mountains are gigantic, primarily because they are composed of two environments within the game: the mountains themselves and Prison Island. Although Captocorn Peak took very little inspiration from its snowy predecessors, the Black Mountains are not shy about their similarities with the same focus on verticality and even complete past areas pasted into the environment, such as the Free Sage Summit or the Threshold to Fioswar. As a result, I'll be discussing various similarities that exist across the slope and fortress. Yet the adopted aspects are all implemented in an interesting fashion that make the Black Mountains feel quite different from Valak Mountain and Tantal. While the two former locations placed an emphasis on expansive snowfields and grandiose views of their contained landscapes, the Black Mountains don't follow that trend. Instead, they place the open area at the very entrance, an unwelcoming landscape littered with ruins and jagged rocks to represent the incomplete merger that Aionios is. This landing then transitions into a series of winding slopes, stairwells, and even floating platforms that the players can jump across to find collectibles and expansion items. Hell, somebody was even nice enough to install a bloody elevator to help travel. Add in some ether slides traveling at a variety of angles, and you have the snow area with the most varied form of traversal. Unfortunately, no crazy ice physics. When inspecting the entire layout, the Black Mountains are actually quite linear due to the choice to construct the area via thinner paths. Since I give this area a lot of praise, it might beg the question as to why I take more issue with Captocorn's linear design, and it's for several reasons. First, the Black Mountains offer several offshoots or alternate routes that not only mix up the method of traversal, but offer rewards. Take this small platforming section here compared to the normal route one might take to reach the large gate. Another notable quality is the narrative presence it holds. I'll discuss this more later, but the Black Mountains are the penultimate area before what lies in the void. The prison island of Future Redeemed, if you will. So what I mean is that Prison Island is the prison island of Future Redeemed. Since there is a deep-rooted drive for the player to reach the finale and see what lies inside Origin, the more linear design is not so much a detriment, but perhaps a recognition of the designers that the players want a focused, epic climb to the ultimate challenge. A goal accomplished via the darker, rougher visuals and music with a presence. What's even more is that unlike Valak Mountain and Tantal, where the player descends to continue the story and reach their objective, here they must ascend the mountain, literally having them rise to the occasion. The Prison Island section is both a nostalgia-driven visit, but quite brief, as most of the areas are the exterior walkways with the exception of the Gondoral Cathedral. I think that the darker skies mixed with the layer of snow serve as an excellent contrast to the last trip to Prison Island, where the sky practically emanated heat from the Bionis' interior with its warmer colors. Although there is absolutely no sentient life to be found on this mountain range, and the halls of Prison Island have been emptied except for the revenants that are fog beast, it still feels like there is a presence here due to the existence of man-made items like the slides, ladders, and elevator.
Think fast!
Alright, so let's run through all the references to previous locations. Befalgar Ruins in the mountain's lower levels is a reference to the secret area Befalgar Pedestal. This secret area named Laluz Temple is a reference to the Laluz Church, both areas which are opened via an emblem adorned with the High Entian sigil. Belgazis' Drifts, that serves as the mountain's base, is named after one of the 5 superbosses from Xenoblade Chronicles, Blizzard Belgazis. Little Bonero ruins found on the upper level of Tantal degrade into the town of Bonero ruins that compose a bulk of the ascent up the mountain. The frozen Nagul waterfall found on the upper level of Valak Mountain lives on for the Mount Nagul viewing deck. Next, we have Ignea Hill, which is taken directly from, well, Ignea Hill, which is found on the lower slopes of Valak Mountain. The same can be said of Kana Peak, which retains its signature treacherous, thin walkway. And finally, to make this long list even more confusing, Free Sage Summit has now been upgraded from merely being Valak Peak to the whole ass mountain. Other locations like the Corridor of Silence, First Sanctum, and Prison Terrace are taken directly from Prison Island with little changes, aside from slight positioning, or the First Sanctum being the third one. Ooh. Since the world has not morphed as much since the universes merged, it's logical that individuals from those original worlds could identify locations like these and pass that information along. Yet, by the time the base game arrives, enough time has passed for most of that information to be lost to time. Most of the wildlife found in the Black Mountains are your staple enemies found in these colder environments. Ares, Oris, Turkin, Igna, and so on. Alongside this ensemble are the numerous fog beasts that occupy Prison Island due to Alpha's presence. Most of the intrigue lies with the unique monsters, though. The Black Mountains feature one of the 6 superbosses this time around, Fog Dweller Abacy, an adaptation on Avalanche Abacy from Valak Mountain, who is fought at the same place of Free Sage Summit, and is also the highest level enemy of its respective game. However, he's not the only dragon, as Dragon King Aukar seemed to have a kid in the form of Dragon God Aukar, who resides in the Raxiel lava flow. Raxiel is actually a reference to Conflagrant Raxiel from Valak Mountain, who is found in the lava cave and must be defeated to get the magma rock. There's also Sensational Gigapur, a Laia found on Gravina Bridge that references Masterful Gigapur from Xenoblade Chronicles. Aside from that, like I mentioned earlier, there's not any advanced life here, so it's rather simple. Like Tantal, the Black Mountains are split into 4 songs, 2 for the mountains themselves and 2 for the Prison Island side of things. However, unlike Tantal, they all retain the same foundation, and were composed by Miriam Abanasser, who has previously done some of the arrangements for Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and Xenogears Revival, the first and the last. Abanasser mentions a few very interesting tidbits in each of her notes, like when she writes, "This is an arranged version of Black Mountains, Prison Island, without the free rhythm and the chorus," which implies that the Prison Island version was the bass song and elements of it were stripped away in order to create a gradual build-up. The night version of the theme also omits the free rhythm and substitutes the strings and brass for a piano and synthesizer in order to give it a more chilling feeling. I would say that it certainly starts out with a cold, scary sensation, but it evolves into probably the loudest of all the night themes in the series. She also notes the use of music from Xenoblade Chronicles 2's later half as reference material for this song. And although I don't think there are any sections directly taken from Xenoblade Chronicles 2's soundtrack, you can certainly hear elements of Yggdrasil, the World Tree theme, in this song like the guitar. Abanasser wanted to capture what she described as the Xenoblade worldview, but I'd like to say it was Xeno as a whole, since a song from the Xenogears arrangement album, Cred, served as her initial inspiration. This song is named Melkaba, and is an adaptation of the Xenogears song Premonition, or Foreboding on the Revival album, that is used in places like Babel Tower and Xenogears' final dungeon. It's an eerie, unsettling melody, but the remix version with the vocals, ramping energy, and instrumentation feel much more in line with what Abanasser was aiming for with the finale to the Black Mountains. I think it's easy to say that Xenoblade Chronicles 3, specifically Future Redeemed, is the culmination of the Xenoblade series, but when you have literal name drops of Xenosaga characters, references to Xenogears in the form of Philadelphia-class cruisers, Joanna Hogg coming in to close out the story of Perfect Works just as she began it, and composers bringing in musical references from the series beyond Xenoblade, I feel it's more apt to say that Future Redeemed is the culmination of Xeno. And on that note, let's close this out with the general story beats. Following Alpha's retreat to Origin, the party determines that the best way to confront him is by scaling the Black Mountains to reach Prison Island. Most of these significant narrative moments take place in the memory space of Origin, or via flashbacks, but prior to that, Shulk, A, and Riku engage in a conversation about what the future holds, and finding strength in loved ones even if they are not physically there, which gives Shulk further development in the form of reservations about what's to come, despite conquering Prison Island before. Although this might seem reductive, remember that he did it with his close friends, and they aren't with him this time, leading to his hesitation. Eventually, at the prison terrace, the party confronts N, who blocks the way as he believes killing Matthew will throttle Alpha's plan and keep them from departing. Which leads to one of my favorite fights in Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Like, look at my boy going crazy here! When colliding with N's sword at the end, the Pneuma Core crystal in Matthew's fist at the end then triggers a look back at what really happened during N's assault on the city. Niall, acting as the vessel for Alpha, arrives to take Gondor, Matthew, and the city's population to a new world. However, N, tasked by Zed, seeks to eliminate Alpha, yet is stopped by Gondor in an attempt to save his own kin. This flashback gives further perspective on a moment from the base game and also manages to give N even more characterization through the interaction with his son. Like, you can tell he's really shaken up by Gondor's actions and didn't want to hurt him, but he doesn't break down in grief in that moment, making his reaction to Mio's death in the base game even stronger. Despite clashing in a similar way to that of their first trip to Prison Island, with even some shots being reused, this encounter with N encapsulates what I love about Future Redeemed, and specifically the Black Mountains. Taking elements we know from previous entries and recontextualizing them within the framework of a new layout and narrative, in a manner that doesn't feel redundant. And the fact that they were able to do that with so many elements going on at once is rather impressive. So, looking back at everything we have just talked about, going into the script, I had a general idea of fan sentiment toward each of the snowy locations and how they stacked up against one another. Yet, I decided to run a poll on my channel to get more concrete results. With over 1,200 votes, here's what you guys had to say. Coming in last with about 3% of the votes was Captocorn Peak, with the thoughts that it isn't a bad area, just lacking star power in a heavily stacked division. In third place was the most recent addition to the series, the Valak Mountains, with 11% of the votes. Many of you noted that the music and atmosphere were top-notch, which I certainly agree with. In second place, with 35% of the votes, was the Kingdom of Tantal, with people citing the ruins, verticality, and soundtrack as drawing points. However, several criticisms of its massive lower floor and navigation kept it from the number 1 spot, which goes to Valak Mountain with 51% of the votes, meaning over 600 people selected it as their go-to snow environment in the series, whether that was due to the extraordinary view or the ice physics. While Valak Mountain is my favorite from the lineup and the whole series, I appreciate something about each of these environments, as I feel the Xenoblade Chronicles series has done an excellent job with making their snow environments diverse, despite working off of the same template, or hell, even the same architecture. The soundtracks are also fantastic, and wonderfully complement the aesthetic, giving off that perfect winter feeling. Hello everyone, and happy holiday season! I hope you are doing well, and thank you for making it to the end of this video. This was a very long one, which funny enough, was actually scripted back in November and December of 2023. I originally planned to have this out by January of 2024 at the latest. As you can tell, I missed that deadline. When things got really busy with my own classes, I knew I wasn't going to be able to get this video done in time, so when things did start to clear up, I finished it up, and by then it was June, and unless I decided to put this out on Christmas in July, I felt it would have been better to hold on to it to, winter of this time. But I really do hope you enjoyed it, and if you did and would like to support the channel, then consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel in order to get notified about when I put out new analyses, whether that's on Xenoblade or any other game. But for the time being, just because I'm recording this 6 months earlier than when it's actually coming out, I don't really have that much to add, so I will just say, I hope you have a wonderful holiday season, enjoy a time with friends, family, yourself, whatever gives you happiness, do stuff that makes you happy, and I will see you for the next video. Until next time.